As a kid, all a nigga wanna have was a Burberry scarf and $3 in my pocket. Instead I got beat with a switch, but I don't give a fuck, but it's on my body. Scars all up on me, but I run around from everybody. Life lesson learned, I better learn from this bitch, nobody. She pushed me around, she didn't give no motherfucks about it. She broke my heart 3 times, but I ain't getting...
So here we go with my last team that I have to preview for the AFC North. Is the Cleveland Browns. And it is true what they say. People say that history repeats itself. And when you look at the Cleveland Browns, that statement holds to be true. Because last season, in 2019, heading into the 2019 season, everybody had high expectations for the Cleveland Browns. Including me. I felt the Cleveland Browns could make it to the playoffs. I mean, you had Baker Mayfield coming off one of the best rookie seasons that we've seen from a rookie quarterback. He had a new head coach in Freddie Kitchens. And, I mean, you had a really good offseason, a really good draft. So, it was a lot of high expectations for the Cleveland Browns heading into the 2019 NFL season. And they didn't even come close to those expectations. They failed miserably. The offensive line was worse than what we expected. Baker Mayfield suffered a sophomore slump because he got complacent. And Freddie Kitchens proved that he wasn't a great head coach. So, now, once again, the Cleveland Browns have the same scenario playing out heading into the 2020 NFL season. They have a great offseason. You bring in Austin Hooper, Jack Conklin in free agency. Then you also pick up Jedrick Willis in this past year's NFL draft. So you have a pretty good offseason, right? Then you bring in a new head coach in Kevin Stefanski, who was really impressive when he was calling plays for Minnesota. Got the most out of Kirk Cousins in that offense. And I mean, on paper, this has potential to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. You got Odell Beckham, you got Jarvis Landry, you got Kareem Hunt, you got Nick Chubb, you got Jedrick Willis, you got Jack Conklin. You got Baker Mayfield, who should look to bounce back from his sophomore slump. You got Odell and Jarvis Landry, two of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL. Also one of the best tight end duos in the NFL with Austin Hooper and David Njoku. So, I mean, when it comes to Kevin Stefanski, he basically has a play caller's dream with all the talent that he's going to have at his disposal on offense. Now, the question when it comes to Kevin Stefanski is, not only is he a good coach, because we've never seen him become a head coach before in the NFL at all, but he has a pretty tough task. Because he has to manage the personalities of this Cleveland Browns team, especially on the offensive side of football. And you got Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, who are two of the biggest personalities in the NFL. And both of these guys demand the football. You got two ball-hungry wide receivers. And when you look at Kevin Stefanski's offense, the majority of the time is basically two wide receiver sets with a lot of tight ends on the field. And we saw the dilemma that he had in Minnesota with Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs at certain points of the season last year. Both those guys were unhappy with their role in the offense. Stephon Diggs was unhappy at one point, and Adam Thielen was unhappy at one point. So you look at Jarvis Landry and Odell, how is Kevin Stefanski going to be able to handle that? Because it seems like no matter how much you get those guys involved, if you're not winning games and you're losing, those two guys are going to be unhappy. So you got a lot of personalities that you got to manage for Kevin Stefanski, and it's really tough for your first-year head coach. You have a great team, but you have a lot of big personalities in that locker room. Then on the defensive side of football, we know how good Cleveland is on offense. But this defense, the defensive line is really good. I like this defensive line. I really like Myles Garrett. If Myles Garrett never bought Mason Rudolph on the noggin with his helmet, he probably would have won Defensive Player of the Year last season. But he ended up getting suspended indefinitely. Then you also got Olivier Vernon. Now, Olivier Vernon is a guy who I've been telling a lot of Browns fans ever since last offseason that he was overrated. And he proved me right last season because he didn't do diddly squat. He was a major letdown. So how good is Olivier Vernon going to do this year? Is he going to prove to me once again that he is one of the most overrated players in the NFL? Or is he going to show up and actually play up to the level of that contract that he's getting paid? So then, your question also lies with, the defensive line is pretty good. The cornerback position is pretty good. You got Denzel Ward, who is able to, if he's able to stay healthy, he's a Pro Bowler without a doubt. Then you got Greedy Williams. Now, Greedy Williams has some highs and he has some lows. Most of the time, he had a lot of lows. Greedy Williams got picked on a lot his rookie season. Now, Greedy Williams can bounce back and at least be, halfway decent or a little bit better than what he was in 2019. Then I think Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams can make a pretty good cornerback tandem. Now, here are the two biggest weaknesses that the Cleveland Browns have on defense. Linebacker and the back end of the secondary, which is safety. Now, linebacker, was already one of the biggest question marks heading into training camp that we were looking forward to seeing how Cleveland would address. Because you lost Joel Schobert and free agency, who signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And basically your best linebacker is Mack Wilson. And as we already know, if you've been keeping up with the Cleveland Browns, Mack Wilson is injured. We don't really know the timetable for his return. So you lose your best linebacker on top of not really having that great of a group of linebackers already. So now that's going to be a major question mark that the Cleveland Browns have to get figured out. And not having a great group of linebackers can really come back to haunt you, regardless of how great of a defense you have. You go back and you look at the Baltimore Ravens, their linebacker unit was one of the worst in the... Well, I wouldn't say it was one of the worst, but it wasn't all that great. And we really started to come to haunt the Baltimore Ravens in, playoff games versus the Tennessee Titans. The linebackers really stood out in that game. So having a not-so-great group of linebackers can really hold back a defense. And, the secondary is also a question mark as well, because Grant Delpit, the guy who we expected to be one of those starting safeties for the Browns, he's out as well with an injury. So then that means to be the question. You got Cedric Wigwam and Carl Joseph. Who's going to start there at those safety spots? We don't really know. So safety and linebacker are the two biggest questions that we have when it's concerning this Cleveland Browns defense. But overall, this is a Cleveland Browns team that you can make an argument once again this offseason that they can make it to the playoffs. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, it's the Cleveland Browns, man. Listen, not everybody can be terrible forever. And that's what a lot of people have to understand. Just like the narrative that teams can't be great forever. Eventually, everything comes to an end. So, could this be the year that the Cleveland Browns finally, get over the hump and finally make it to the playoffs? Because they haven't made it to the playoffs ever since 2002, which was the year I was born. So, in my 18 years being alive, I've never once seen Cleveland make it to the playoffs. So, is this the year they make it to the playoffs? I mean, I think it's likely, even though they are playing in a pretty tough division with the Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. But, I mean, I think the Cleveland Browns could get this AFC North back to their former days of glory, because a lot of people seem to forget that at the start of the past decade, the AFC North was one of the few divisions in NFL history to have three teams make it to the playoffs on 4 straight years in a row. You had the Bengals, you had the Steelers, and you had the Ravens, who were all making it to the playoffs consecutively. So, can the Cleveland Browns get the AFC North back to that level when they could have 3 teams in the playoffs at once? Now, look, I know games aren't played on paper, but you look at this Cleveland Browns roster, at least on the offensive side of football, this is a playoff caliber team. Now, the question is, Kevin Stefanski. Can Kevin Stefanski prove that he is finally the head coach that the Cleveland Browns have been searching for the last 18 years? Because the Cleveland Browns have basically been playing Russian roulette when it comes to hiring new head coaches. They also play Russian roulette with the front office. So can Kevin Stefanski finally be the man who can set a culture and set a tone in that locker room? Can he be a guy that can demand the respect of his players? Because I don't think Freddie Kitchens really had a lot of respect from his players. And it showed because a lot of players basically said whatever they wanted to, and it seemed like they just walked all over Kevin Stefanski, on Freddie Kitchens, Seemed like Freddie Kitchens had no control over that locker room. If the Cleveland Browns want to be successful this season, Kevin Stefanski has to be able to demand control of that locker room. Now, I really like his offense because his offense plays to Baker Mayfield's strength, which is play action. Baker Mayfield, although he did disappoint last season, was one of the best play action passers in the NFL. And when you look at all the success that Kevin Stefanski had when he called play action with Kirk Cousins in that Vikings offense, it voted well for Minnesota. Then you also got a really good group of halfbacks. You got Nick Chubb and you got Kareem Hunt, which basically you can, choose whoever and you can get pretty solid production. So, I mean, the Cleveland Browns, I'm not saying they're going to make it to the playoffs, but I do think that they have a pretty good possibility of making it to the playoffs this season. So, you guys let me know what you guys think about the Cleveland Browns, because I think the Browns are a really interesting team this season. Because, once again, this is a team that has a lot of talent, but as we know, games are played on paper. Another thing that's going against the Cleveland Browns is that with this pandemic that has been going on, it has cut this offseason short. Training camp is winding down. You pretty much have only had 3 to 4 weeks to prepare for the NFL season, and you got the Browns to learn a new system under Kevin Stefanski. So are they going to be able to learn enough of the offense come week 1 that they're going to be able to, not look rusty? And how long is it going to take for this Cleveland Browns offense and Baker Mayfield and the rest of these guys to master this Kevin Stefanski playbook? So the Cleveland Browns are one of the more interesting teams heading into the 2020 NFL season.